Hello. I am Matt Williamson. Happy Steelers victory. I am recording this directly after the game ended. The rest of the late games are pretty bad, so I got a small window here before the nightcap kicks off on Sunday. Nice Steeler win. It really was. First off, Vegas is really bad, and we'll get into that. But we're going to start with the stats as we usually do, and then a bunch of observations. Tomorrow will be a deeper dive, will be a second watch, a lot more research on my part. But I don't know that this one needs a whole lot of diagnosing, to be pretty honest with you. They did what they had to do in pretty impressive fashion against, again, what I think is a very poor football team, especially on the day you got them with their injuries and their quarterback, etc. But that's what you're supposed to do to poor football teams. So at the half, though, wasn't feeling quite as good. It was 9-7. Fields was 10 for 17, 83 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. But he had 5 for 43 and a touchdown on the ground. And really, they didn't ask him to do a ton through the air in this game. But O'Connell was 10 for 15 for 85, no touchdowns, no picks. And at that point, Bowers had 3 catches for 25 yards at halftime. And I just wrote, man, it seems like so much more. It seems like he's hurting them and he's... cut to the chase. He's all they had. Pickens at that point had 6 targets. They were trying to give him the ball. Only 2 for 22, though. A little bit more on that later. Steelers had 152 yards at the half, though. I mean, you'll take that. Remember when they strived to get to 300? Well, they were very much on that pace at the half. They'd given up 117. They'd ran 34 plays compared to 25 for Vegas. 82 rushing yards in the first half compared to 32. That's what you want to see from this team, without question. Yards per play wasn't great. 4-5 for the Steelers versus 4-7 for Vegas. This is at the half. But they controlled the clock, a little bit over 18 minutes of time of possession compared to just under 12 for Vegas. The penalties, there was only 1 Vegas penalty at that point for 12 yards and 5 for 40. Starting to worry me that it might be a trend a little bit. But turnovers at that point, Steelers had none, but boy, they were bailed out on an interception too. I mean, that was a terrible interception by Fields that got called back because of the roughing the passer. Doesn't make it an okay play though, but you got away with it. Vegas had 1 at the half. Third downs, they were 3 for 8, where Vegas was 0 for 3. Didn't convert a third down in the first half. Fourth down, Steelers were 1 for 1, and Vegas was 0 for 1, but their only fourth down attempt was a Hail Mary at the end of the half, so that really doesn't even count either. 0 sacks in the whole first half. Really, my note from at halftime was Raiders really did nothing after their first drive. All they have is Bowers. I wrote that, I bet, 10 times in this game. All they have is Bowers. All they have is Bowers. And then I wrote, Steelers will be ultra conservative in the second half, because it felt like one of those situations where Tomlin kind of had him where he wanted him in terms of the Steelers' D and didn't fear the Raiders to score a ton of points. But the Steelers did some bigger things in the second half, and the Fields finished 10 for 24 for 145. No touches, no picks, but 11 rushes for 59, 2 rushing scores. O'Connell threw the ball 40 times, far from ideal for somebody with his skill set, to say the least. Connected on 27 of them. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now, let me stop here just for a second, because a lot of these final stats make this game seem like it was pretty evenly matched, and it really wasn't, because there's a lot of garbage time production here for the Raiders. For example, on their last score, the Steelers didn't have TJ Watt on the field. This thing was over. But Bowers ended up with 10 targets, caught 9 of them for only 71 yards, though. And, again, all they had was Bowers. That being said, I would have taken that stat line yesterday. I mean, he catches 9 out of 10. I don't love that. But only 71? Okay, they probably bottled him up after the catch, things of that nature. 100% true. They threw to Pickens 8 times. He caught 3 of them. 59 yards. Looks like they were trying to appease him a little bit at the end, which frankly I had no problem with whatsoever. But no one on the team had more than 3 catches. They just didn't throw the ball much or complete many passes or have to. Najee was very impressive in this game. I was a little hard on him this week. There's no doubt about that. But he ends up with 14 carries for 106 yards, 2 catches for 16, and explosive plays and running away from people and big play. Well, I don't know about running away from people. One touchdown, he was running away from people, but ran really hard. It was kind of the engine of the offense, which is great. And frankly, they shut him down later. His numbers would have been much greater, of course. I mean, their leading rusher for the Raiders was Madison with only 33 yards. And like these stats are, I almost hesitate not to tell you, but it's something we do every game as we go through these and talk through them. Because they're really close, but they're not really close. 293 to 275 total yards favoring the Steelers. Steelers ran 62 plays as opposed to 60. 4.7 yards per play compared to 4.6 for Vegas. Rushing yards, though. 183 to 57. That one held up. That one is true. That one tells the story. Time of possession, 31:51 to 28:09. But again, much of that was late when the game didn't matter. Third downs, I don't love this. Steelers were 4 for 13 on third downs. Not great. But again, third down defense was great. Vegas was only 2 of 11. Steelers were 1 for 1 on fourth. Vegas was 1 for 3. 7 for 50 in terms of penalties for the Steelers. It's okay in today's NFL. There's a lot of penalties. Vegas, though. 4 for 42. You'd be like, oh, that's not too bad. Oh, boy, though. I mean, you talk about untimely penalties from a Vegas perspective. I mean, everything they did wrong in that regard felt like it cost them points or gave the Steelers points or, I mean, just brutal. So when it was all said and done, Steelers didn't turn the ball over. They were +3. Vegas turned the ball over 3 times. Also blocked a punt. Fourth down situation, they took the ball away. So, really good stuff by the Steelers. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the NFL to college, BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to Online Casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today. Use the promo code BELIEVE, all caps, BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. The Raiders are terrible. They're dysfunctional. They have very little in the way of playmakers. Their top 2 wide receivers, their second best defensive player, were all out in this game amongst others. Not that the Steelers were clean bill of health at all. We'll get to that a little bit too. But much of this game I wouldn't say was the greatest example of high-end NFL football. But then the dam kind of broke and the Steelers just started whipping up on them. And, the Raiders were forcing things. And then comes the turnovers and penalties and just lack of talent. I mean, they had dudes running routes that I had never really even heard of. And I'm sure you hadn't either. For the 100th time, all they had was Bowers. They had no running game. So, Steelers D was good. But all they had was Bowers. They did have one bad defensive series. And it was the first one. Raiders moved the ball down the field with relative ease. And I think you can look, it's starting to be a trend. Indy was certainly that way. Is that a prep thing from the Steelers? Or can we glass half full it and say, boy, they made nice adjustments after that? Everyone will harp on, Tomlin didn't have this team prepared. But they don't ever say, Tomlin and staff made great adjustments, They came out flat, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It was a bad series. If that series would have taken place at the middle of the third quarter, nobody would have cared. Still, so many big plays by the Steeler defense and special teams. It is a big play unit. That's why you're paying those guys. It's a veteran unit. And a lot of big plays against a lesser opponent. Again, a lot of the Raiders' yardage was in garbage time, so those numbers are inflated, skewed, however you want to call it. Again, I'm just throwing out random notes. These just bullet points. Is my immediate reaction often is. I think Patrick Queen's getting better. I didn't see him getting picked on. I saw him make more plays. His speed has always been evident, his range, but I think he's starting to settle in. That's 2 good games in a row on first blush that I'm pretty happy with. Beanie Bishop, who I think has been basically the worst regular contributor on the defense, which, if that's your worst guy, good. You don't have anything invested in him. But I thought he made plays in this one. It seemed definitely like his best showing as a Steeler. But everyone made plays, which was great. I mean, Jackson out there. I mean, a lot of big plays on defense. Great. And frankly, I thought the non-Watt backup practice squad edge guys weren't exposed. By no means did I think they got picked on or looked horrible out there collectively. And they got a little experience under their belt. Almost kind of like, I'm treating this almost like a preseason game, but they got some experience. So next week or at some point in the year, you're going to have to count on them again. And the coaching staff will just be a lot more likely to be cool with that. You know what I mean? Real strong Fields game. I mean, he was never forced to be a drop back passer and rip you up through the air. But I know I've waffled on this, and I think it's just a tough decision. So I think I've been as upfront as possible on this Fields versus Wilson thing, and I definitely want to see Wilson. But after this game, after putting up that many points, I think you at least have to play Fields next week, right? I mean, is it that obvious? I mean, am I still holding a candle for Wilson, who really hasn't done anything wrong? But we'll talk about that more during the week. But I don't know, you can put Fields on the bench after this game. Crosby was awesome. And that poor guy is getting no help from anyone around him. He could draw a lot more holds. He's making plays left and right. Man, he should get out of that organization and go play for a winner. You know what I mean? Because, boy, is he good. He is basically Watt level good and just stands out in a sea of mediocrity or poor players. Only one Steelers sack. Are we worried about that? Not really. You would think you'd have more on that many dropbacks. I mean, I'm nitpicking here, Even with the backup edge guys, you'd think you'd end up with more than one sack, but I bet their pressure numbers were pretty good. Yeah. Frazier, left ankle, took him to the locker room, never came back. The announcer said this, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but it said that he wanted to come back in. Remember, this is the same guy that broke his leg at West Virginia and was on a treadmill very shortly after. I mean, his toughness and stuff is craziness. If it's just a sprain or a heavy sprain, will he play through it? I'm sure he'll want to. But as he's limping off or laying there on the field, I'm thinking, is that the O-lineman they can least afford to lose? I mean, he's that good now. And if McCollum is the answer behind him, I thought they might go to Anderson, but then they wouldn't have had him as a backup elsewhere. McCollum's a center only. That's a massive drop-off, at least from what I've seen from McCollum, in preseason and things like that. But you hate that. That's going to be one of the biggest. Obviously, Fields-Wilson's a big story, but the Frazier injury situation is going to be something we're going to have to worry about. Hopefully we get good news. Who knows? The Raiders penalties, I mentioned this earlier. There was probably 2 or 3 of them I didn't think were correct. They favored the Steelers. And I urge you, if you go back and look at those Raider penalties, if that would have been against your favorite team, you would have been up in arms on at least 2 of them. And they were just all so super costly, which wasn't necessarily the Steelers doing good things, as more or less the Raiders just doing super bad things at the absolute wrong time. There you go. This is kind of crazy. That was their 4th red zone takeaway to to start the season. That's almost a red zone takeaway a week. Now, that, of course, isn't sustainable and is a really tough way to live. But they also put you in a bind down there, too. Crazy. Last two little things I have aren't all that substantial, but I was so excited to see Warren, partially because I was kind of down on Harris, and Harris was outstanding. But Warren seemed rusty, a little off. Maybe this is a good game just to knock that rust off, and that's not really I'm not one for cliches, but I do think if you haven't played that position for a while and you're not going to really be in there for a long stretch getting your rhythm, that we shouldn't have expected his best game. But maybe next week he'll look like the guy from last year, which would be awesome. Last thing, and I'm nitpicking again because, I would like to see more throws into the end zone. And that's a Wilson thing. I don't think it's not a Fields thing. I don't know if it's an Arthur Smith thing. But I might do some homework for, compared to the 31 other teams, how many passes have the Steelers actually thrown into the end zone? I bet it's really low. All right, everyone. 90% good stuff. Some of it wasn't pretty. Beginning was a little worrisome. But there is something to be said for beating up on a lesser opponent and wearing them down. And there's a lot to be said for getting a win and going to 4-2. And there you have it. All right, much more on this game tomorrow.